Jonathan Hayes did not believe in coincidence. Not in business. Not in life. As the staff cleaned the spill, he remained still for a few seconds longer than necessary, replaying the moment in his mind like a security recording. The timing. The angle. The exact second she reacted. Most people reacted after events. She reacted before them. That was what unsettled him. Emily had already returned to her routine, refilling water at another table, nodding politely, listening more than she spoke. If someone had walked in at that moment, they would have assumed nothing unusual had happened. But Jonathan noticed something else now. She was scanning constantly. Not obviously. Subtle. Her eyes moved the way experienced executives watched boardrooms. Doorways. Hands. Body language. Exit paths. Risk assessment. That was not normal training for restaurant staff. His phone vibrated. A message from his chief operations officer asking about a delayed shipment. Normally, he would answer immediately. Instead, he kept watching her. Emily noticed a child about to knock over a glass and moved it half an inch without interrupting her conversation. She handed a customer extra napkins before he realized he needed them. She stepped aside before a hurried waiter turned the corner too fast. Predictive behavior. Anticipation. Pattern recognition. Jonathan finally spoke as she passed his table again. You saw that coming. Emily stopped. Not defensive. Not surprised. Just attentive. I saw the cart wheel wobbling earlier, she said calmly. It was drifting slightly left every time it rolled past the tile seam. Jonathan narrowed his eyes slightly. You noticed that from across the room. She gave a small shrug. I noticed small things. That answer was too simple. People with real skill often spoke like that. Understatement instead of explanation. Jonathan asked, did you work in safety inspection before this? A small pause. Less than a second. But he saw it. A decision moment. No, she said. Just experience. Then she added, would you like a refill on your sparkling water, sir? Deflection. Clean. Professional. Controlled. Jonathan almost smiled. He had seen that tactic in negotiation rooms many times. Redirect. Reduce exposure. Offer something neutral. He declined the water. She nodded and moved on. Jonathan sat back down instead of leaving. That alone surprised him. He had not sat down during a lunch meeting in years unless there was profit involved. 10 minutes later, he opened his secure contact application and sent a short message. Background check. Emily Carter. Current employee. Priority level 2. The reply came within 60 seconds. Understood. Preliminary results by tonight. Jonathan locked his phone and looked up again. Emily was helping an elderly couple split a dessert evenly, measuring portions with the precision of someone who believed fairness mattered. No rush. No impatience. Just quiet competence. For the first time in a long while, Jonathan felt something unfamiliar. Not curiosity about profit. Not strategic interest. Something else. Respect beginning to form. Not because she impressed him. Because she did not try to. That was rare. Very rare. When his driver finally texted that the car was waiting outside, Jonathan stood again. This time more slowly. As he passed Emily, he said something he did not usually say to service staff. Thank you. She nodded once. No surprise. No gratitude performance. Just acknowledgement. You are welcome, sir. As Jonathan stepped outside into the cool Manhattan afternoon, one thought stayed with him. The most valuable people in any system were not always the loudest ones. Sometimes they were the ones quietly preventing disasters no one else even noticed. That night, Jonathan Hayes did something he had not done in years. He waited for information that had nothing to do with money. His office sat on the 42nd floor overlooking Midtown Manhattan, walls of glass framing the city like a living blueprint of ambition. Screens displayed shipping routes, revenue charts, and international time zones. Normally, this was where he felt most comfortable. Control lived here. Predictability lived here. But tonight his attention kept drifting back to a quiet waitress with observant eyes. At 7:18 p.m. his phone vibrated. Preliminary background report ready. Jonathan opened the encrypted file. Name, Emily Carter. Age, 27. Employment history, mostly restaurant positions. No executive experience. No graduate degree. No certifications listed. Education, 2 years at Hudson Community College. Major listed as general studies. Nothing remarkable. Nothing explaining the precision he had witnessed. Jonathan leaned back in his chair. That was the problem. When something did not match the pattern, it meant the visible data was incomplete. He had built his fortune finding missing pieces. He kept reading. No criminal record. No lawsuits. No financial irregularities. Credit score average. Rental history stable. Medical records private. Then one small line near the bottom caught his attention. Previous enrollment noted at a private training institute. Withdrawn before completion. Program name partially redacted due to privacy protections. Jonathan sat forward slightly. Now that was interesting. He requested expanded access. Authorization granted within minutes. The next document loaded slowly. Program description, behavioral risk assessment, and environmental awareness certification. Focus areas included situational awareness, human behavior prediction, environmental threat detection, and rapid response decision-making. Jonathan read the description twice. That explained the eyes, the scanning, the anticipation. But one question remained. Why would someone trained for high-level security analysis be serving coffee for $23 an hour? He looked at the withdrawal date. 3 years earlier. No completion listed. No follow-up employment in that field. Just restaurant work. Something had interrupted that path. Something important enough to change a career trajectory completely. Jonathan closed the file, but did not turn back to his financial dashboards. Instead, he found himself remembering a single sentence she had said. I notice small things. That was exactly how top analysts spoke. They never claimed brilliance. They just described observation. Outside his window, Manhattan lights flickered on one by one. Millions of stories happening at once. Millions of invisible people holding systems together without recognition. Jonathan realized something uncomfortable. If Emily had been wearing a tailored suit instead of a black apron, he would have called her impressive. If she had presented that same awareness inside a boardroom, he would have offered her a position immediately. The only difference was the uniform. That realization stayed with him longer than he expected. At 9:02 p.m., another notification arrived. Additional note from investigator. Subject withdrew from program due to documented family medical hardship. Financial strain noted. No further details available. Jonathan stared at that sentence. Family. Obligation. Sacrifice. Variables his spreadsheets never measured correctly. He stood and walked toward the window. Far below, traffic flowed like data streams. Predictable. Measurable. Controlled. But people were different. People carried invisible stories. And sometimes the most capable ones were simply the ones who chose responsibility over recognition. Jonathan made a quiet decision. Tomorrow he would return to that restaurant. Not as a customer. As an observer. Because something told him Emily Carter was not finished surprising him. And Jonathan Hayes had built his entire life on one principle. When something does not make sense, you look closer. Jonathan Hayes arrived earlier than necessary the next morning. 11:15 a.m. 45 minutes before. His usual lunch window. That alone would have surprised anyone who knew him. He did not arrive early. He optimized time. But today he wanted something unusual. Observation without being observed. He chose a corner table with a clear view of the dining floor. No meeting scheduled. No laptop open. Just coffee. Black. No sugar. Emily Carter did not notice him at first. Or at least she gave no sign that she had. She moved through the room with the same controlled rhythm he remembered. Nothing wasted. Nothing rushed. A dropped fork was replaced before the customer asked. A chair leg that wobbled was adjusted with a folded napkin without interrupting conversation. Small corrections. Constant corrections. Jonathan realized she was doing what his operations teams did across 52 distribution centers, preventing small failures from becoming expensive ones. Around noon, the restaurant began to fill. Voices rose. Orders overlapped. Pressure increased. That was when patterns became harder to maintain. Most people showed stress here. Emily did not. She became even calmer. That was when Jonathan noticed something else. A man near the entrance was growing impatient. Mid-50s. Expensive suit. Loud voice. The kind of customer who believed volume created importance. Emily approached with her usual calm tone. Your table will be ready shortly, sir. The man sighed dramatically. Checked his watch. Complained about time. Emily listened without reacting emotionally. No defensiveness. No submission. Just steady presence. Then she said something simple. I can seat you now at a quieter table if you prefer privacy, or the window table in about 4 minutes if you prefer the view. 2 options. Both reasonable. Both restoring control. The man paused. His frustration had nowhere to go. Window table, he said. Emily nodded. I will have it ready in exactly 4 minutes. Jonathan checked his watch without thinking. 3 minutes and 50 seconds later, she guided the man to the window. Precision again. Not luck. Training. Later, a new host accidentally double-booked a section. Confusion started to ripple. Emily stepped in quietly. Rearranged 2 reservations. Coordinated timing with the kitchen. Prevented embarrassment before management even noticed the problem. Jonathan found himself analyzing her the way he evaluated senior hires. Situational awareness. Emotional intelligence. Decision speed. Resource management. She scored higher than some executives. He paid 6-figure salaries. Finally, she approached his table. This time she did recognize him. A brief flicker of recognition. Nothing more. Good afternoon, she said. Same tone as yesterday. No special treatment. No curiosity about his return. Would you like your usual sparkling water? Jonathan almost laughed internally. She remembered. Of course she did. Yes, he said. Then after a moment he added, you seem to run this place without anyone noticing. Emily placed the glass down carefully. I just try to make things easier for people. Jonathan studied her expression. No ambition showing. No desire to impress. Just quiet purpose. You trained in behavioral risk detection, he said. Not a question. A statement. For the first time her stillness changed slightly. Not fear. Not panic. Just awareness that the conversation had shifted. She met his eyes directly. Yes. No explanation added. Jonathan asked, why are you working here? A simple question. A complicated answer. Emily looked toward the dining room briefly, making sure everything remained stable. Then she said something that stayed with him long after. Because sometimes the right thing to do is not the impressive thing to do. She gave a small polite nod and moved to her next table. Jonathan did not call her back. Because for the first time in a very long time, he was not trying to control the conversation. He was trying to understand it. Jonathan Hayes did not leave immediately after that conversation. That alone was unusual. Normally he measured lunch in minutes, not experiences. But something about Emily Carter made efficiency feel less important than understanding. He watched the dining room again, but now with a different perspective. Not as a CEO evaluating performance, as a student trying to understand a system he had overlooked. Around 1:10 p.m., a small disruption began forming near the kitchen entrance. Not loud, not obvious, but Jonathan noticed Emily noticed it. A young waiter had misread an order ticket. 2 identical steaks prepared differently, medium rare and well done. The wrong one was already walking toward the wrong table. A mistake small enough to embarrass the staff, large enough to upset an important client. Emily stepped in without announcing herself. She intercepted the plate with a quiet word, adjusted the table numbers in seconds, redirected the dishes before either customer realized there had been an error. No correction speech. No apology required. Just prevention. Jonathan leaned back slightly. That was executive-level crisis management happening at $16 an hour plus tips. A few minutes later, Emily brought his check. He had only ordered coffee and sparkling water. $12.75. He placed his card on the tray but did not slide it toward her yet. You left your training because of family, he said calmly. Not invasive. Not aggressive. Just observation. Emily did not answer immediately. She folded the receipt holder neatly. A small habit of order. Then she said, my younger brother needed long-term physical therapy after an accident. She kept her voice even. Insurance covered part of it. Not all of it. Jonathan said nothing. She continued. Someone had to work full-time. No self-pity. No dramatic tone. Just facts. And you chose to be that person. Emily nodded slightly. He is walking again now? That is what matters. Jonathan recognized that mindset. Long-term return over short-term gain. Except her investment had been a human being. Jonathan finally slid the card forward. Then he asked, do you plan to go back to that field? Emily gave a small thoughtful pause. Not uncertainty. Consideration. Maybe someday. Right now my brother is finishing his last year of rehabilitation. After that he wants to study engineering. A small smile appeared. The first genuine one Jonathan had seen. He is much smarter than I am. Jonathan almost disagreed out loud. Instead he asked, does he know what you gave up? Emily shook her head softly. That was never the point. She processed the payment quickly and returned the receipt. Jonathan added a larger tip than before. Not out of charity. Out of recognition. Emily saw the number. No reaction. No widened eyes. Just the same professional nod. Thank you, sir. As she turned to leave, Jonathan said something unexpected even to himself. Your skills are being wasted here. Emily stopped, but did not turn around immediately. When she did, her expression was calm but firm. Skills are never wasted when they are used to take care of people. That answer stayed in the air after she walked away. Jonathan remained seated for another minute. Not because he needed to, because something inside his thinking had shifted slightly. For years he had believed value came from scale, revenue, expansion, market reach. But Emily Carter operated on a different metric. Impact measured one person at a time. And for the first time, Jonathan Hayes began to wonder if he had been measuring success too narrowly. Jonathan Hayes returned again the next day, and the day after that. At first he told himself it was coincidence, a convenient location between meetings, efficient scheduling. But he knew better. He was studying something he did not fully understand yet. Emily Carter never asked why he kept coming back. That was another unusual thing about her. Most people around him always wanted something. Access, opportunity, attention. Emily wanted none of those things. She treated him exactly the same as every other customer. Same calm tone, same neutral professionalism, same quiet competence. On Thursday afternoon, a sudden summer storm rolled across Manhattan. Dark clouds gathered fast between the skyscrapers. Rain began falling hard against the tall windows, turning the streets into rivers of reflected headlights. The restaurant grew busier as people rushed inside to escape the weather. Pressure increased. Noise increased. Mistakes became more likely. Jonathan watched how Emily adapted. She adjusted seating to avoid crowded walkways. She reminded staff to dry the entrance floor to prevent slips. She repositioned a floor sign before anyone asked. Preventive thinking again. At 12:57 p.m., the power flickered once. Just a half-second interruption. Lights dimmed. Conversations paused. Most people looked up. Emily looked toward the emergency lighting panels. Not fear. Assessment. Jonathan noticed. Of course he noticed. A few seconds later, everything stabilized. The backup systems held. Customers relaxed. But Jonathan saw something else. Emily counted silently. 1, 2, 3. Confirming systems recovery. That was trained behavior. Later, as she brought his usual water, Jonathan asked quietly, "Do you miss it?" Emily understood immediately what he meant. No need to clarify. She considered the question seriously. Sometimes, she admitted. Not the pressure, not the long hours, but the feeling of being responsible for outcomes. Jonathan nodded slightly. He understood that feeling better than most. You still think like someone in that field, he said. Emily gave a small, thoughtful smile. Training does not really leave you. You just use it differently. Jonathan asked, "Do you ever regret the decision?" Emily shook her head without hesitation. No. Then she added something that surprised him. Regret usually comes from choosing yourself over what matters. I chose what mattered. That sentence stayed with him. Later that afternoon, Jonathan stepped outside to take a call. When he returned, he noticed something unusual near the entrance. A delivery driver, struggling with several large boxes while trying to hold the door open. Customers walked past without noticing. Emily noticed. Of course she did. She held the door, cleared space, helped organize the drop without making the man feel embarrassed. No announcement, no performance, just help. When she returned inside, Jonathan said quietly, "You could be running operations for a Fortune 500 company." Emily answered without ego, "Maybe, but today I helped a delivery driver finish his route on time. That matters too." Jonathan realized something then. She did not measure importance by scale. She measured it by immediacy. Who needed help right now? Not someday. Not strategically. Now. As Jonathan prepared to leave, he paused before walking out. "Emily," he said, the first time he had used her name. She looked up, calm as always. "Yes, sir." Jonathan hesitated slightly. A rare thing. Then he said, "I think you are the most overqualified person I have ever met." Emily almost laughed. Just a small breath of amusement. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I am exactly where I am supposed to be right now." Jonathan stepped out into the clearing afternoon sky with a thought he could not ignore anymore. Some people chase position. Others simply live their values. And sometimes the second group changes more lives than the first. Jonathan Hayes began noticing changes in himself that he did not plan. Small ones at first. The kind no one else would detect. He started thanking receptionists in his own buildings. Listening longer during briefings instead of interrupting. asking junior analysts what they thought before giving instructions. At first, his executives assumed he was testing a new leadership style. They did not realize he was learning something much simpler. Attention! The following Monday, he arrived at the restaurant during a slower hour. 11:05 a.m. Only a few tables occupied. Sunlight came through the tall windows, reflecting off polished glass and making the room feel softer than usual. Emily was organizing a supply shelf near the service station. Every item aligned. Labels facing forward. Expiration dates checked. Inventory without a spreadsheet. Jonathan approached without announcing himself. "You run this place like a control center," he said. Emily looked up. Slight surprise. Then recognition. "Organization prevents problems," she answered simply. Jonathan nodded. "That is exactly what I tell my operations directors." Emily replied. "Good systems usually come from the same ideas. Pay attention early. Fix small things." Jonathan leaned slightly against the edge of the service counter, not in his usual executive posture. Almost relaxed. "You think like a strategist," he said. Emily gave a small shrug. "I think like someone who does not like chaos." Jonathan almost smiled. That answer sounded more honest than impressive. After a moment, he said something he had been considering for days. "I have a position open in corporate risk analysis. Starting salary $120,000 a year. Full benefits. Flexible hours. You would be very good at it." Emily did not react the way most people would. No widened eyes. No sudden excitement. She just listened. Processing. Measuring. Then she asked, "What would happen to the person currently doing that job?" Jonathan answered honestly, "No one. It is a new position." Emily nodded slowly, respecting the transparency. Then she asked another question. "How many hours a week?" Jonathan answered, "Usually around 50. Sometimes more during major projects." Emily thought quietly for a few seconds. Then she said something he did not expect. "I cannot." Jonathan did not argue, but he did ask why. Emily answered without hesitation. "My brother still has therapy sessions 3 afternoons a week. I take him. I also help him with his coursework in the evenings. If I leave that schedule, he loses stability." Jonathan studied her expression carefully. No doubt. No conflict. Decision already made. "Most people would take that offer immediately," he said. Emily nodded slightly. "Most people do not have my responsibilities." Jonathan asked, "What about later?" Emily gave a small calm smile. "Later is a different conversation." She picked up an order pad as another table needed assistance. But before she left, she added something that stayed with him. "Opportunity is only valuable if you can accept it without abandoning what matters." Jonathan remained standing there after she walked away. Not disappointed. Not frustrated. Something else. Respect. Real respect. Because for the first time in a long time, he had offered something money could not buy. And someone had still chosen something else. As he returned to his table, Jonathan realized a quiet truth. Character was easiest to see in people who had nothing to prove. And Emily Carter had absolutely nothing to prove to anyone. Jonathan Hayes did not make the offer again. That was another change. The old version of him would have negotiated, increased the salary, added incentives, found leverage. But Emily Carter had made something clear without saying it directly. She was not deciding based on money. She was deciding based on alignment. That required a different kind of respect. A week passed. Then another. Jonathan still came in 2 or 3 times each week. Not always speaking much. Just watching. Learning. One afternoon, he noticed something new. Emily looked more tired than usual. Not distracted. Not careless. Just carrying more weight behind her calm expression. When she brought his coffee, he asked quietly, "Long day?" She answered honestly, "My brother has a major evaluation this week. If he passes, he can move from assisted therapy to independent training." Jonathan heard the importance immediately. Milestones mattered. In business. In recovery. "Is he ready?" Jonathan asked. Emily nodded. "He worked harder than anyone I know." There was pride in her voice. Not for herself. For him. That detail mattered to Jonathan. Later that day, he made a quiet phone call from his office. Not to an executive. Not to a client. To the director of a rehabilitation technology foundation his company had funded 2 years earlier. He asked about advanced support programs, scholarship assistance, equipment grants. Not as charity. As opportunity. He asked one question. What do the best recovery cases have in common? The answer was simple. Stability. Encouragement. Access. Jonathan understood immediately. 3 days later, he returned to the restaurant. Same table, same routine. Emily approached with the same calm professionalism. No expectation of anything unusual. Jonathan handed her a plain envelope. No company logo, no presentation, just paper. This is information about a program that might help your brother, he said. Emily hesitated before taking it. Not suspicious. Careful. She opened it after stepping aside. Inside was a brochure for an advanced mobility support grant, therapy coverage, adaptive training equipment, educational support funding. She read it twice, then looked back at him. Why? She asked simply. Jonathan answered just as simply. Because someone once helped me when I was starting out. They did not make a speech about it. They just removed one obstacle. Emily was quiet for several seconds, processing, measuring intention. Finally, she said, I cannot accept charity. Jonathan shook his head slightly. It is not charity. It is a program your brother qualifies for. I only connected information. That distinction mattered. Emily understood the difference. Help, without ownership. Opportunity, without obligation. She nodded slowly. Thank you. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just sincere. Jonathan replied. He did the hard part. You just made sure he had the chance. Emily returned the envelope carefully to her apron pocket. Not as money, as possibility. That evening, Jonathan left without saying much more. Because he understood something important. Real help does not create debt. It creates momentum. And sometimes the strongest people are the ones who simply need one barrier removed to keep moving forward. As Jonathan walked out into the evening city noise, he realized something else had changed inside him. Success used to mean winning. Now it was starting to mean enabling others to win too. 2 weeks later, Jonathan Hayes walked into the restaurant and immediately noticed something different. Emily Carter was smiling before she even reached his table. Not the professional smile she gave every customer. A real one. The kind that comes from relief. From something finally working after a long uncertainty. When she reached him, she did not start with the usual greeting. She simply said, he passed. Jonathan did not need clarification. Independent training? He asked. Emily nodded. Independent training. There was quiet pride in her voice. They said his recovery speed surprised them. Jonathan felt something rare. Satisfaction without ownership. He only nodded once. I never doubted that he would. Emily hesitated a moment, then added something she did not usually share. He also got accepted into an engineering program starting next fall. Jonathan allowed himself a small, genuine smile. That sounds exactly right. Emily gave a small laugh. He already started designing improvements for his own therapy equipment. Says most of it could be made more efficient. Jonathan almost laughed. That sounds like an engineer already. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just a quiet understanding passing between two people who respected effort. Then Emily said something unexpected. I have been thinking about what you said. Jonathan waited. She continued. About using my training again. That got his attention. Not because he wanted to recruit her. Because he knew this decision meant something had shifted. My brother told me something yesterday, she said. He said I taught him how to fight through recovery. And now it was my turn to go back to what I was good at. Jonathan said nothing. Some moments should not be interrupted. Emily continued. I still cannot take a full corporate schedule. But maybe part-time. Maybe consulting. Jonathan nodded slowly. That is a smart way to begin. Emily looked at him directly. If the offer is still real. Jonathan answered immediately. It was never withdrawn. Emily gave a small calm breath. Not excitement. Readiness. Then I would like to try. Jonathan did not celebrate. Did not turn it into a transaction. He simply said, we will build something that works for your schedule. Emily nodded. Agreement between equals. Not employer and employee. Later that afternoon, Jonathan prepared to leave as usual. But before he stepped out, he paused. Emily, he said. She looked up. Yes. Jonathan said something simple. You changed how I see leadership. Emily seemed surprised by that. How? She asked. Jonathan answered honestly. I used to think leadership meant being the smartest person in the room. He paused slightly, then added, now I think it means noticing the people everyone else overlooks. Emily considered that quietly. Then she said something that became the final lesson between them. The strongest systems are built by people who care about the small things. Jonathan nodded once. That sounded exactly right. As he walked back into the rhythm of Manhattan, Jonathan Hayes understood something he wished he had learned earlier in life. Intelligence does not always introduce itself. Character does not always announce itself. And sometimes the person who changes your direction the most is the one nobody else was paying attention to.